Hello, everyone. It's Jerry at the Fledge, and welcome to another episode of Every Damn Day. I'm sitting here with my guest already, so you guys can figure out who it is. Backwards in the sanctuary more than normal, and I've got a shirt on that I love to wear. That's a green eggs and ham shirt. It's a shout out to my daughter Daniela because it was her shirt and she gave it to me at some point. So let's get to my guest real quick. Edward Smith, how you doing today?
I'm good, Jerry. I'm good.
Who you want to give a shout out to?
I'd like to give a shout out to my family first and foremost, but then a shout out to everybody. Just hang in there. I know things are complicated. We're coming off this pandemic. Anxiety levels have increased and everything. I just want to show some support for humankind and say we can do this.
Yeah. So today you walked in the Fledge and I was moving stuff around, getting ready. My guest had canceled on me, and I'm like, I'm trying to get my uncle to come to my guest or be my guest. And the first thing you say to me is, whenever I need something, opportunity just presents itself. And I was like, right on, my man, because you are my opportunity.
Step right into it.
So you were scheduled for a week out or so.
Yep,
like
next
that.
Saturday.
So thanks for coming in today.
You're welcome.
And you are episode 339, which is, I think is, to me, it's a better number than 345.
Exactly.
Maybe not. I don't know.
It's a double.
Yeah. So let's get into you a little bit. Where were you born and raised? Where'd you go to school? You know, what's your deal, man?
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I stayed there up until, my father died when I was 10 of heart disease. Then 6 years later, my mother ended up with cancer, and she would eventually die too. So I moved to Lansing from there and stayed with my older sisters. I was number 9 out of 11. So I always tell people I really benefited from having a big family because there was always somebody to look up to, somebody to show you or give you direction. And so moving here was, it was probably the biggest move in my life. Even though things have been tragic, there was still some good outcome to it.
Your mother passed when you were still a kid?
Yeah, I was 15.
I'm sorry about that. I guess you might have told me before, but I knew you grew up in Grand Rapids, but where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Grand Rapids. I was at Union High, and I dropped out in the 10th grade. And then when my mother was in the hospital with cancer, I went to see her, and we had a long talk. And one of the things she said to me was, get back in school and graduate. And I said, I will. And so when I came to Lansing, I was back in school. It was odd because I was going to Everett, and they discovered I was in the wrong district after one semester, and I had to transfer to Eastern. So I ended up graduating in 78 from Eastern High School.
I spent my first year at Everett and then went to Eastern. So Quakers,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
And you did something. So our school is right there, right? Our school has been sold to Sparrow, yeah. And you got some special stuff in there, though, right?
Yeah, in 78 when I graduated, the principal, the assistant principal there, Richard Allen, called me into his office. Actually, I was a custodian. It always seems I'm cleaning.
Was it Robert Allen?
Robert Allen.
Robert Allen.
And he called me into his office, and he said, he turned me around and pointed to the wall above his door, and he says, I need a mural up there. I like skiing. So I painted this big mural up on his wall. It was ski slopes with a hawk in the center of it, flying across with the sun behind it. And it's still there today from 1978.
Is it something like we could go get and take apart?
No, it's on the wall. It's a permanent fixture there. But Sparrow and the people who are alumni of Eastern have told me that they won't destroy it. It'll be there for as long as the building stands. So I was happy with that. The bad thing about it's not where everyone can see it. You'd have to come into his office, his old office, and then turn around and look up above the door.
Unfortunately, I've been in this office before. Yeah. He suspended me almost immediately.
A lot of my friends had been in there too, and they said one guy who I graduated with said, oh, I thought somebody did it who got punished for doing something wrong. I said, no, they paid me.
It's your community service at school.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you graduate from high school. Then what's going on? Or was there a different story about you? When did you start helping kids with art?
Oh, well, during high school, which was really interesting. I had a part-time job when I was at Eastern. After school, I would go to Oak Park Elementary and I would clean. I was still, the janitor work. I guess they think that's a good thing for people of color. Give them a job as a janitor. They can at least do that. But anyways, one of the teachers there, Mr. Rodriguez, he had seen some of my artwork. And he says, I've seen your artwork at some of the shows, because I was doing shows at the time in Lansing. And he said, could you come in and teach my kids art theory? And I said, yeah. So I would, instead of cleaning lockers, in buffing floors, I would come into his class after school and teach 3rd and 4th graders art theory, color matching, color analogies, anything to do with color. I was teaching. And so that's, like I tell people, that's the first time I had a classroom. I was an 11th, 12th grader at Eastern. So.
Is this Mr. Rodriguez who would have become the principal of Gardner?
Yes.
And now he's like this big shot media mogul?
The same guy.
He used to chase me around the halls yelling at me, man. And I didn't realize till a long time before. It's because he had high expectations of me. I always thought he was picking on me. What the hell I got?
He was a really good guy. And also he took me to lunch a few times and paid for my tacos and things like that. So I ate pretty good too.
So you get promoted from janitor to art teacher. That's a good move, right?
Yeah.
And thanks, Mr. Rodriguez, for that. Do you think that was significant in your trajectory with art?
It really was, because I had never worked with kids. I had never even thought about working with kids. When my parents died, that was the thing that pushed me back into doing art. In fact, it was my father who had got me started, and he died when I was 10. But prior to that, between the ages of 5 and 10 years old, he always had me working on art. And plus they were musicians too. They sang and they played instruments. So we were in an artistic environment at home. And I really do think that he was preparing me for what he envisioned as a life for me.
So you had a lot of support then, because sometimes a young man who wants to be an artist gets a father that says, no son of mine's going to be no artist.
Exactly. Yeah. He was different than that. He had these starched shirts that he would have. He always got his shirts cleaned at American Cleaners on Division Street in Grand Rapids. And they would starch these shirts and the collars and everything, these white shirts that he would wear to church. And inside was a cardboard insert, like the one cardboard piece you get in some shirts now. And on those inserts, there were always pictures. So he would give me that and I'd just color it in, And then one day he brought home a package of shirts and pulled out the inserts and gave them to me, but there was no pictures on them. So I thought, what do I do? And my father was really, he had expectations of everyone, but within moderation. But he expected you to figure it out before you come to him. At least try to figure it out. And I did. I sat there and said, well, do I go to him and he's going to tell me figure it out? Or do I figure it out? And I sat down, I started drawing the line pictures in and then coloring them. So it just blossomed from there.
Just real quick, Erica Munchback is saying hi to us and she's enjoying this. So,
hi, Erica.
And I'm having a lot of fun too, Erica, because being around this guy makes me smile all the time. So, all right. So you graduate from high school. And then what?
I ended up going back to Grand Rapids to Kendall. And this is the funny thing about it, that after my father died, we were really a self-sustaining family. He was the breadwinner. My mom was a home mother, you know, and even though we went to school, she always took care of the home. But when he died, she ended up going to work. We couldn't afford the life that we had while he was alive. We ended up in the projects, Clancy Street projects, in fact. And behind Clancy Street projects on Leonard was the Kendall School of Design. And we used to always play around there as kids. So I thought it was really odd. I ended up getting accepted at Kendall. And I went back to Grand Rapids for a certification at Kendall. I got there and Kendall was fine for about a year. And then I discovered that, you know, it was a mixture of schools of thought with art. Kendall was primarily a commercial art program back then. Unlike now, it's gone into fine art. But back then it was furniture design and illustration, all commercial art forms. And I realized commercial art wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do fine art. And so I left Kendall and struck out on my own and started to teach myself to paint. And I ended up back here in Lansing, slept out of my car for a lot of months and lived out of it. Even though I had family, I was more wanting to, I didn't want to lean on them for anything because they were still young and growing too, you know. And so I lived out of my car, and then I started landing jobs. I ended up down in Jackson working down there at a mealpedic processing plant. It was a corporation in about 20 different countries. And what they did, they made artificial breast and swimwear for women. And so I went there again at the bottom of the totem pole.
Wait, what's that word?
Mealpedic. They called it mealpedic back then. They dealt with prosthetics, limbs, arms, hands, artificial breasts, but they also made wear so that, you know, the wear was comparable to accommodating these artificial prosthetics that they were developing. Mr. Firestone was the president, Mr. Rogers. I remember them because they remembered everybody from top to bottom. They just knew who you were. And once again, as I went there, I started at the bottom of the barrel as a janitor, cleaning again. Seems to be the theme for everything I did. I have to start at the bottom. But eventually I got promoted to printmaker. And what my job was, I printed the labels that go inside your shirt to tell you how to wash, how to rinse, and what to do and not to do with the fabric. Was there a certain,
I don't know, serendipity there? Because you were bringing the paper out of the collars and now you're putting the tag in the collar?
It was sort of funny because I always tell people that when I worked that job, I felt it was really important because once you understand fabric and things like that, and then they had the guys on the line who did the die cuts and the materials, selected all that stuff. So you were really coordinating the effort. You were just a part of a bigger picture.
Did you have to research and figure out what that label should say, or did they just hand you something?
I had to research. I had to do my research because if you misprint those labels then and they get attached to the wrong garment, then everything goes to hell. So yeah,
like, that damn janitor.
Put them back in the closet and give them a broom, you know.
We're going to keep talking about the janitor effect. I'm going to call it right now as we keep moving forward.
You are a mind reader because a lot of the things I did started that way, you know, at the bottom, cleaning or whatever, and work your way up.
I can't even, you know, I'm not going to talk anymore. We'll just go on to the next thing. I'll get to what I was going to say.
Okay.
So what was the next thing?
And after that, I was at Camp International, and I ended up doing the Michigan seals. I was telling you about that earlier. And the old big round plastic seals that they have with the state of Michigan emblem on them, they're really cast in a plastic mold, and the mold was always brown. And you see blue and gold on the images that if you see them on the wall. Well, that was my job, paint the blue and paint the gold. And I would always tell people, if you lift some of them off the wall and look on back, you probably see my signature on the inside.
So if you got one of those and it has a signature, it's going to be worth millions.
It'll say Edward Smith on there. It'll probably have the year, which was around 1983, 84. And the director came in one day, and Cheryl Shilcoat was her name. And she says, you're really good at this and you're good with people. What do you think about teaching kids? And I said, well, I used to, and back when I was in high school. And she was like, well, you're perfect. She says, we want you to come and work the Head Start program as a teacher assistant with the special needs kids. We will pay for your education so you can get your certification in early childhood development and psychology through Spring Arbor, which they did. They gave me all of that. And it was really an interesting job. I grew from that because some of the kids who were handicapped, there was spinal bifida, some had mental health issues. There was the hearing impaired girls, which I show pictures on my Facebook page a lot whenever I think about them, because the hearing impaired girls, they really taught me a lot. And they were experienced, and I was just learning beginner sign language. So they taught me a lot about how to not only read the hand signs, but to look at the full expression, because sometimes when a person's signing to you, you're just reading or visually hearing words. But if you look at their face and their expression, then the words have more meaning and impact to them. They would take my face and turn it towards them and say, look at me, while I'm talking, not just at my hands. And these were 4 and 5, 6-year-olds. But I always tell people it was a blessing for me to be in that position.
I wrestled with some kids that were deaf, and I learned a ton from them and the experience of being with them. Because it was around the time of Walkmans, the cassette. Yeah. And they would always take my Walkman and play it. And I'm thinking, it's kind of a waste or something, but it wasn't. They were getting off on the vibrations.
That's right. They can feel
so
vibration. Yeah, they're really sensitive to sound and visual expressions too. So that's what they read. That's their way of hearing.
So you did that for a while.
I did that for a while, and I was teaching in a classroom. I had just got my certification and passed all my exams and my in-class interviews and training, because you have to do a in-class testing. A person comes and observes you run a classroom. And that was in 87. And one of the women who was a teacher that I worked with says, I bet you'd work good with some kids who are older. And she says, I want you to meet my husband. And in walks Bill Hudson, her husband, and he says, my name's Sergeant Bill Hudson, Michigan Department of Corrections. And my wife tells me you're really good with people, and I want to recruit you, because at the time in 87, it was 6 years since the riots had happened in Jackson. And what the department found after evaluation and court complaints by inmates was that the inmates had some things they wanted to see change. They wanted more diversity in the department hiring, because there were very few Black people in the department, and very few, and even less women. The women never worked with prisoners. They had office jobs. The prisoners didn't want that. They wanted more diversity, and they wanted an increased staffing, because they wanted protections too. They're still human, and they still have concerns. And so Bill came in and recruited me in 87, early 87. I finished the school year out, and then in May of 1987, I went to work for the Department of Corrections. It was about a 3.5 months of training. I went to the first 6-8 weeks was in class at the Dale Foltz Academy in Jackson. Then we had 2 weeks on the job, where I went to the State Prison of Southern Michigan for 2 weeks and trained with officers. And then after that, we went back to the class. And like I was telling you earlier, before I went on the job training, my sergeant looked at me and said, when you come back, we won't be able to tell you shit, because what we've taught you in the books and what you'll learn through dealing with people is going to be two different things. And he was right. They couldn't tell me shit when I went back for that final third phase. I was really good at the job because I was really good with people. And so I ended up going over to the Charles Egler facility, which was a level 3, level 4 inmates. And that was because the lieutenants called
What's
me.
level 3, level 4?
There's certain levels. When a guy gets when they do your pre-sentencing report before your sentencing, they develop a plan as to what level you should be incarcerated at. The lesser the crime, the lower the level. The more higher or violent the crime is, the higher the level.
Is the highest one or the highest?
Your lifers are more like 4s, 5s, and 6s.
Okay. So
and
a low number is...
Yep.
Okay.
3 4s is getting into lower numbers. Violent tendencies possibly, but manageable.
Okay.
And there was 2 ways they looked at that. They had a criteria. What's your confinement level? Your confinement level 4, 5, 6. What's your management level? How easily can you be managed, or are you difficult to be managed? So that could also raise or lower what level of prison you go into. And so I was in with level 3s and 4s, some tendencies to be violent, but manageable. And
Just
so
like Division.
Exactly. And I
Division Street in Grand Rapids is what I just was saying.
That's it. It is. Yeah, it's a rough zone. and it was really funny though, because when I went into Egler, like I was telling you earlier, a lot of the guys say, "Hey, I know you. I went to school with your brother or your sister." So it was just like being at home. Being in the project, being in the inner city, and the education there for me was really important because there's good officers and bad officers, and everybody knows who's good and who's bad, whether you're an inmate or an officer. Even officers would tell you, don't fuck with that dude there. He ain't no good. And they talking about another officer. And so you knew. And but the interesting thing was that the inmates were always testing me constantly, because they want to know where your mind is and how strong your mind is. And so I was always challenged by thoughts, what I thought, what I felt about certain things. And there was this prisoner, his name was Shady Gray. I shouldn't say prisoner because I always called them inmates. But after my first year, Shady would tell me, he'd say, "Hey, Smitty, remember you used to run up and down those galleries, because this is a building 4 stories high with over 300 inmates, and that's just on one side of it, another 300 on the other." And he said, "Remember they'd have you run up and down those stairs to lock them in and count time? And now you just walk down the base gallery, you look up at them and point, and they go." And he said, "They respect you." And I never realized that, because it's a fast-paced environment. There's always things going on. And not bad things. I mean, normal routine activities. The prisoners are locked in, but it's your job to unlock them when they got to go to eat, when they got to go on their job, when they have a visit. So you're constantly moving, dealing with, and doing stuff. And I had never taken the time to notice that I had gone from running up and down those 4 galleries, which was a lot of good exercise, but just standing down on base and saying, "Hey, it's time to go." And they say, "Okay." And they go. And he said, "They respect you now." And the thing I learned was they respected me because I respected them. And as I was telling you earlier, whenever they piss me off, I always call them men. You men. That's how I look at it, because I expected them to act like men. And they knew that. That was my expectation. Act like men, because eventually you're going to be out of here and you're going to have to be a man in order to survive the world you're going to go back into.
In that process, do you think that most of the time you respected them first, or they respected you first?
I respected them first, and that's how it started.
Yeah.
I had to show them respect. Like I said, I hate using the word prisoner or convict. I would tend to use the word an inmate, but most often when I addressed them as a whole, it was as men, you men. And they respected that because that's what they wanted to be treated like. Not kids, not adolescents, not ignorant people, but men.
When you look at that, the population of inmates or the population of men, what do you see? What do you see? Do you see these little kids that got shaded in some way, or got?
I see people who had issues with impulse control. A lot of them had problems with controlling that immediate impulse, especially when it came to anger and venting anger. There was one guy he was at a party, and this was a young kid. I'm going back over 30 some odd years now, but he was a young man. He couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. He was in prison for life because he killed a guy with a ball bat. And why that happened? He was at a party, and this guy kept playing grab ass with his girl, and he kept telling him, leave her alone. And the guy kept doing it, and his impulse was, there was a bat laying there, he hit him over the head, and the guy was dead immediately. But then the promising thing about his life is that girl he was with, every weekend at a specific time, she was there to see him. And we all as officers knew that because we'd have to go key him out so he could get his shower and get dressed up and go see her. But faithfully, she was there every time to see him. And that's commitment.
Even though he was going to be there for life.
For life. And he was young. He had been there before me. And at the time I met him, he had probably been down for like 3 years. So he's maybe 17, 18 when he got locked up. And he was in his 20s, of 21, 22 years old when I met him. And as far as management, he was in a 3 and 4 level, which meant he had committed a violent crime, but he was manageable.
Yeah. He didn't really want to commit that crime.
No, it was a matter of his impulses. He should have restrained. He needed to understand how to restrain his actions, not to let the anger get the best of him.
Was he eligible for parole?
Yeah, eventually. He would have to do a lot of time, but he was eligible for parole. Hopefully he's out now. I've seen a lot of them parole. We had one guy who was locked up back when I was in elementary school for kidnapping. He was addicted to drugs. He went to rob a bank. It went wrong. He took a woman hostage and tried to get away with her as his hostage. Well, immediately the Lindbergh law came into effect, which is kidnapping, an automatic life sentence. This guy was in his 50s when I met him. He had several degrees. He had started several programs on rehab. He was teaching reading and educational fundamentals to people who were illiterate. And he was doing all the right things for about, 30, 40 years now, because I was a kid when he got locked up. And so we give recommendations to parole boards, and we thought he needed to have his sentence commenced.
You as a corrections officer?
Yeah. Oh. And I wasn't the only one. There were lots of us who wrote on his behalf, officers, counselors, wardens, deputy wardens, and said he needs to be let go because, he made a mistake back in the 60s, a foolish young kid mistake. But look at what he's developed into now. And sure enough, John Engler gave him a pardon and released him. It was so funny because he told us, he says, I've never used a cell phone. I've never been on an elevator. I don't know how to use one. So you're going to learn. Don't worry. You'll learn.
You showed up at that. I didn't quite understand why you were at the reentry resource fair that we had on around the 4th of July there. But hearing this story, I understand a lot more. And we have guys that come here a lot that they just got out, they get recommended to us or whatever. And I just think of Bobby. He had this cell phone for 3 days and had no idea how to answer it. It would just keep ringing and it was like, hello.
You got to remember, they've never ever had these electronic devices or held them before, so they have it's all a new world for them. They've been locked away, and in time we've evolved in technology, but they're still back in the time they were incarcerated in.
Earlier we were talking about the inmates and the guards, and it almost sounded sometimes like the guards were almost worse than the inmates.
Oh, yeah.
And whether it was little politics and bickering all the way to
it was just
complete corruption.
It was stupid and childish, and there was some corruption, not a lot, but the problem that we have now in society, and this is the way I feel about it, the problem that we have in society is that you have good people and you have bad people. And that's not only in prison, it's out on the streets, it's in the system of justice too. And the problem with justice is they choose to remain silent when they have people within their own ranks who are corrupt. And you can't let that go, because then you're ruining the whole process, because you turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to officer corruption.
Inmates see that too,
right? Inmates see that, yeah. And so they're like, why in the hell should I care or be alarmed about what you can do to me when you're just as corrupt as I am?
So it's all bullshit at that point.
It is, yeah. It wrecks everything. And that's the problem we have in our judiciary system. And I'm not just talking about police officers. You have judges and prosecutors who are the same way. And unless you clean house, it'll always continue.
Dude, man, there's so many things. We're gonna have.
We could talk for a week.
It's gonna be a 6-hour show, everyone. So just get some popcorn and sit down. When you look at the prison population, the inmates, I always think about how I don't think people are born to be an inmate. They're not born to commit a crime, right? And we do these things to them, and we put them in situations. And I think we all should take ownership for that. We should have grace, and we should say that baby that was born didn't want to hit that guy with the bat, and also that guy that kept messing with this girl should have.
And this is where working in the Head Start program and learning about the early childhood development and psychology really helped me, was that I understood the importance of the first 5 years of a child's life. I have 7 kids. They're all in college now. Well, some are out of college, but they all have good jobs. They're doing good for themselves. We put them in a position to succeed because we know they're going to have failures. Society is going to put you in a position of where you fail. But we made sure that we put them in a position to have the best opportunity for success in their life. And it's the same with these inmates that you see. That first 5 years, somebody didn't pay attention to them. Somebody didn't interact with them. You have to listen to kids. Even the youngest of kids have something on their mind. Oh, yeah. You think these little kids don't have stressors? They do. They're no different than adults. It's just on a different level because of their age. But they have the same stressors, if not more than we do. And they're attentive to what's going on in our life. If we're stressed, they're stressed. We can dump our stress on them and we may not even know it. But I always told people those first 5 years are most important years in development, because that's when you get to mold your kids. Now, I don't believe in disciplining kids. I never did, because I got my ass whipped by my father once. I tell you, he only had to do it one time and I knew. And what hurt me was the fact, not that he whooped my ass, but that everybody knew about it. That was embarrassing. In a family of 11, there are no secrets. You get your ass whipped by dad, everybody in the house knows it. And but I also realized, and this is what I taught my kids too, is that it hurt him to even have to do it. because he expected more of me.
Yeah.
And so when my kids in that first 5 years, I can recall having to swat them on that diaper, but it hurt me more than it hurt them. It just hurt their feelings. They got over that. And half of them can't even remember it. But after the first 5, I never laid a hand on them, ever, because I felt they're old enough now. I can communicate with them and reason with them and get them to make the adjustments that I need them to make. And that's what we have to do in this system too. We have to be more communicative with people instead of just, dropping the hammer on them and pounding them into the ground, destroying their life forever and declaring ourselves just, because the only thing just about us is we're just as bad as they are. That's it.
I want to come back to that. I'm just going to give a shout out to Rena. You know Rena Risper?
Yeah, I know Rena Risper.
So she's sending some love to you right now.
Well, I love you too, Rena. I miss you.
I think she heard
She's awesome. She is.
Yeah. So, do you think it's a judicial system with justice, or is it a revenge system?
I don't think it's a revenge system. I think it's more of an animosity kind of system where we've allowed. There's a lyrics from a song I remember hearing, and it says, "Don't let the past remind us of what we are not now." See, we are not of the past anymore. We are beyond slavery. We need to get beyond racism. We need to get beyond having animosity towards each other. We cannot allow the past to dictate how we are now. Technology has changed, it's grown, it's blossomed. We see that every day. Yet minds have still remained prehistoric. And we have to evolve into something better, into something greater, because we have all the tools and the ability to do so.
I'm trying to navigate how I phrase this because I want to say it right, or logically right.
Mm-hmm.
So who should forget about racism? Or who should forget about slavery? Who should forget about racism? Us collectively, or?
Collectively. We need to change our way of thinking. We need to say, okay, that was the past. It's not saying don't teach it, because people need to be made aware of it. And sometimes you need to be made aware of what happened then in order to understand where and why we are what we are now.
And how not to repeat it.
Exactly.
Do you, so critical race theory, definitely be teaching that right now.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Which obviously we both agree with. Do you think that, where am I going with this? I don't know where I'm going with this.
That's okay. Just
I'll go back to Rena real quick and
go with it.
Yeah, she said, I have to come on. We need love.
Yeah.
So
she does. I love her.
Yeah, definitely do that, Rena. There's like 14 slots.
I told her
back up.
When she was running for office, I said, you got my vote. Yeah, I hope she'll run.
You've known her for a long time?
I've known Rena. I did an interview, or actually I did an article for her paper a long time ago. And I'm sorry I couldn't continue with that, but I just get so overwhelmed. And I'm good for procrastinating too. So that's a thing that I work on with me. I do that every day faithfully. But I've known Rena, I'm trying to think of when we first met. It's been like 6, maybe 7 years or more. 2012, sometime in there. So quite a while.
All right. She said that they're having a similar discussion. And I think that slavery is in our DNA, that it's made a tweak to the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And
it has, in a way. It's like the theory of the elephant that was staked to a tree, and they kept him staked there for so long, only 5 feet of chain, so he could only travel 5 feet. That was his whole life. Bathroom, meals, everything, nothing within a 5 feet diameter. And when they unchained him, guess what? He didn't venture beyond that 5 feet. It was like the chain was still attached to him. And these are things that I talk about, those chains of history. We have to learn to break them. We have to learn to break them, which is the same thing I felt about disciplining. I got my tail whooped when I was young, but my parents, they had the same thing happen to them being whipped when they were young. But that's a chain we got to break. We got to stop that, because after so long, no matter how much you whip a person, it's not going to change things. It's how well you can communicate it with them and let them know what these expectations are you have of them, and then give them the freedom to exercise themselves and those expectations so that they develop into something more adaptable to society, because society will throw everything it can at you. Yeah. It will. And these kids, I really feel sorry for them, because I know it was hard for me growing up. It's even harder now, on definitely. These children. And we are so caught up as adults in our responsibilities that we don't always focus on that, our future. Whenever I see kids, whether they're mine or somebody else's, I am always looking at my future. That's what I see. I see my future, and there's hope for that future.
But I already tell you I love you on the show.
I
once.
did. I told you I love
right,
you too,
right.
Man.
So let's get into some of your or did we miss anything?
No,
because I know there's a million things that you've done.
I did. You'd be surprised what you can fit into 63 years of living.
I would be surprised, because you constantly surprise me. How did we even meet?
It was George Pirowski, July, his name. But anyways, George would come here, and she had a little session on Sunday where she would come in and create art. And so I knew her from class back at LCC, because we were both in the same painting class together. So I would come in too, and that's how we met. It was through her, actually. And that was back in, I don't know, 2014, maybe 2015. I forget exactly. It was in the early stages of the Fledge.
Yeah. Okay.
And she would show up here on Sundays, and I always told her, I said, this is my Sunday worship to come here. And that's where we met.
And it's Sunday today.
Exactly.
Well,
and we sat right over there at that table, or table like that, and we created art, and you came in and introduced yourself to me, and we've hit it off ever since.
And anything you've ever bounced in here and just kind of took part in, people remember you, like Will from Chicago.
Yeah,
I think you guys are Facebook
Will Soderberg. We're
Facebook
friends. I really appreciate Will. It was fun being down there, even though my musical skills, I need to practice. Practice is important. But I played drums on one of his CDs, so he says I'm on there. What I played, I can't even remember that day. But I also did the artwork for a CD cover. Yep. And so I really appreciated that experience with Will, because it opened my eyes to some other things that I'd like to get into in the future with music and with art.
So let's talk about some of the things you're into and the projects you're doing. Where you want to start?
Let's start with how about we start with Wet Paint Productions?
Okay.
That's my favorite pet. Wet Paint Productions, I started back in 2017. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to get out and establish art in places, placing art and establishing art in places that you really don't always see art in, like your banks, your libraries, and try to get these people more engaged in saying, hey, even though this is what we do, we also have a venue where we let these artists come in and we hang their work. I did a show at the Old City Market back in 2017. I did several displays down at the Lansing Public Library in their window. And also with NAMI, I've done some shows with them over the last 3-4 years.
National Alliance for Mental Illness.
Yeah, exactly. And those are the venues that I look forward to working with, because I think that everybody needs a little art in their life, you know, and people can't always
Everybody needs a lot of art.
a lot of art. It's just it's like what a friend told me about reading. I remember asking this friend of mine, why do you read so many books? This was when I was a young man. And she looked at me and her eyes started to water up. She said, I read so much because it takes me to places I may never get to live to see. And art does that too. Takes you places you may never ever get to live to see or experience.
It's one of my favorite Einstein quotes is, you know, knowledge is, well, he basically says imagination is more important than knowledge. Because imagination can take you everywhere. Knowledge is actually a border.
Exactly. When I taught with kids, especially in art, I would always tell the parents that, you know, all these children here won't become an artist, you know, but I want them to be creative thinkers. I want them to have an imagination. I want them to do things that, or at least conceptualize things that most people would refrain from even trying to give thought to, you know, to be, whether they become a physician, electrician, or a plumber. I want them to be creative thinkers. That's what I'm developing here, not just an artist, but a creative thinker, the bigger picture.
Do you think you predicted the creative economy then? Because that's what we're in right now, right?
Yeah. I'm really enjoying the future. You know, at 62, I know I won't live forever, but I'm really happy with the direction that things are going in. And I know after 62 years of living, that it's still going to take work. We haven't arrived there yet. I may not live to see it, but I see that the possibilities are there.
Well, I want to talk to you about living to see it, because I didn't know your father died of heart disease, and now you're having a little heart disease, right? But you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot to correct that.
Absolutely.
No meat Mondays. I follow you on Facebook. I stalk you. What's Edward up to?
The diet really helped with a lot of things. And I always contribute that to my first years of heart disease. And well, actually, it was something that followed me throughout childhood. And even when I was in the prison, I was wearing devices and monitors so they could keep track of it. I just wore it under the shirt and nobody could see it. But it got worse in 2009. I had a dietitian come in. I forget her name. She lived out of state, but we always communicated about diets, healthy eating, healthy foods, things like that. And then when I ended up not being eligible for that program anymore, isn't that something how you have to be eligible for anything good? But I wasn't no longer eligible for that program. And I met Rita O'Brien, who ran the greenhouse over here on Kalamazoo Street at the park at Hunter. And I called her my dietitian after that, because she's the one who got me going with growing healthy food. And so I started to grow my own produce, which I do every year now. I grow a lot of the things I eat, and I started the No Meat Monday for my friends who are either vegan or vegetarian. Sometimes I have, products that are made from meat, like cheeses and milks, but I try to keep it meatless, for them. And I appreciate that. I had that No Meat Monday, and then the Wu-Tang Wednesday is meat but healthy.
All right, so number one, we're all supposed to get behind this and do the No Meat Monday with you.
Hey, I'd appreciate
I'm gonna do
it.
that.
You can designate any day.
I thought it was just you, like doing your thing.
No,
I didn't know we were all a squad. So
you can designate any day as your No Meat Monday. I do at least one day a week where there's just no meat in it. It's usually Monday, and it's usually a quick meal. The meals aren't that complicated, even though they may look complicated when people see and hear what I'm putting into them. But the more I do them, the easier it becomes. I know off the top of my head, I need so much of this, so much of that.
They always have a great aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
Because you're an artist.
Exactly.
So Wu-Tang Wednesday, what's that?
That's my meals that have meat in them. Okay. I just call them Wu-Tang Wednesday. Yep.
Okay.
I eat, I'm a meat eater, and I know a lot of my vegan friends and vegetarians don't. they look at me and sort of roll their eyes, like Rita and Robert. They're both vegetarians or vegan. They don't do the meat, and they'll tell you that. They're
I
serious
won't do
about
the pork.
it.
I haven't eaten pork in
But,
40 some years.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I make a good ham and I do good ribs and things like that. So I do splurge every now and then. You know, it's not always like the perfect meal, but even those meals are healthy. But the key is that with everything that you do, you have to do it within limits. You know, you don't want to be excessive with it. Do it within moderation.
Yeah.
You know, and manage it. Just keeping track of what's going into your body.
We got way off from Wet Paint Productions.
Let's go back to that. That's okay. We can go back to
Let's
it.
show. So you left a couple paintings here.
Yeah,
I love them. I wear these T-shirts. You make T-shirts out of them too.
Exactly.
You still selling the T-shirts?
Yep, I still
Because I think I need a large in both. Actually, I think.
And I got some white
Michael
ones.
Lynn or someone.
I got some white ones because I knew you said.
Oh.
Jerry said to me, "Man, this shirt is really nice, but it's black and it's so hot out."
It was
and,
98 degrees on that day, though, man.
And it's true, but I do my research too. With everything I do, I Google, I read researchers and what they're saying about not just food, but with art too. And I did my research on T-shirts, and they said the best T-shirts to sell are T-shirts done in black because people stain their shirts, and they, you know, if you have white, I spill lots on white shirts. And so that's why you should do more of the black ones. And so I did, but now I printed out a bunch of ones in white too. So if you want a white one, I can get you one. No charge. I'll do an exchange and we can donate the black one to Goodwill or something.
No, man, I already broke them in. I got them all comfortable. I wore them in LA. People are like, who's this white dude wearing this I can't breathe shirt? They didn't understand.
These are my favorite. And I'll put this one up here. This is the
Here, let's get this mic out of the way.
This is the I Can't Breathe. It's my Liberty 2021. And I did a bunch of Liberty paintings. I think the first one I did was in 2011. And in 2011, I always look at what's the impulse of society. Back in 2011, we were seeing a resurgence in women's rights and women's liberty, equal pay, you know, for doing an equal service, which I really believe in that. All of us who had moms, our moms were that way back in the 70s. And so I began, my first liberty was about the liberation of women, you know, and it's coming to that. We see it now that even in the courts, they're starting to agree that this has been wrong and we need to undo it. We need to pay women the equivalent of what men are getting paid for doing the same service.
I think they're up to about 78% now.
So change is coming. It takes time. And I started that in 2011 with the Liberty paintings, and it's evolved into this, like the I Can't Breathe, which is one of my favorites.
You can't skip over the Statue of Liberty that got me in all the trouble because you had her boobies sticking out.
Which one? The 2013?
The one that was. Remember
yeah.
That caused a lot of controversy with the
that was another one that I believe in. In fact, the person who bought that was my sister. And she's seen that painting for years. And she told me one day, she said, "Remember that Liberty painting you did?" And I said, "Which one?" She says, "Well, the one that was about Mexico." She said, "I've been thinking about Liberty, and so I want to collect a series of Liberty paintings." And so she's got that one. I still have to get her two more. I haven't figured out which ones yet.
See, I didn't know it was your sister because I always wanted. I always figured you'd tell me, "Oh, someone's going to buy this for $200," and then I just start bidding with them.
No,
I always wanted that painting. But now that I know it's your sister,
she's been one of my biggest supporters. You know, her and another one of my sisters who's gone now. But they were like my biggest supporters since I was 10 years old. I can remember them always supporting the art. And she just happened to be at home. And when I talked to you about it, that was the day before she called me and said, "I've been thinking about Liberty and I want that painting." And I said, "Okay." But that was the Travailleur de Libertad, which is a labor of liberty. I did that back in, I forget what year it was, maybe 2015 or so. But
was it signed 2012?
2012
I think it
maybe.
was signed 2012.
And the interesting thing about that painting was that was at a time where we were still having the conflict at the borders with Mexico and people coming in illegally. And my impression was, and the reason I painted that, I felt that in order to establish relations with Mexico and with the insurgence of people coming here from the southern border, we have to extend our liberties into Mexico, just like we do with Canada. You don't see a big bum rush of Canadians coming into Michigan, but we go back and forth from both sides. We've extended liberties to Canada. Why can't we extend our liberties into Mexico?
I think you're exactly right.
And that's why I painted that painting, because it was time to do away with all the nonsense, do away with all the finger pointing. These people want to come here. They're looking for opportunity. A lot of them have found opportunities here. A lot of farmers, and I've met farmers, even clear as St. John's, who have hired people just like that coming here from Mexico and housed them too, because they have homes for them on their land to house them and give them jobs, and they migrate based on the weather and the opportunity to work. But I spoke with a guy in St. John's years ago who does that. He says, yeah, I hire them. They come here, they work, and then when the snow sets in and we're not doing the farming, they go elsewhere to continue to make a living, and then they come back here, when the season or when the planting season begins. So
I love that painting because people didn't understand it quite at first. They didn't know if you were. They actually accused the artist. They didn't know who you were.
It's okay.
Oh, that guy's racist. He's anti-Latino or whatever. And I'm like,
no.
Look at that. Look at what this is. And it almost looked like you would have painted it right when Trump was doing his bullshit about.
I know.
Right?
I know.
So you were 4 years ahead of that.
It's like everything has its own season, and with art, I really believe that, there's paintings that I've seen done by painters centuries ago, but they're so in tune with what's happening right now. And with my Liberty paintings, with some of them, if she's pregnant, it means she's giving birth to a new idea. And that's what people are afraid of. They're afraid to give birth and give life to a new idea. And that's why she was pregnant, because that was a new idea. We need to embrace this opportunity to bring these people in, allow them to have the liberties that we have here. So
and then there were other people that thought you were being disrespectful in a patriotic way for making her like that. But I'm like, that's what I've always thought of. I mean, she's huddling or hugging. I don't know the right word.
She's holding these immigrants like they were her children. Yeah. She's got them in her arm just like a mom would hold her child. Yeah. So, and that's
it was a beautiful.
I love that painting. That was one of the most impactful political ones that I've ever done.
Tell your sister if she wants to double her money.
I hear you. And it's funny though that people will look at art and they draw their own conclusions and make their perceptions, and that's okay. That's what art is all about, to draw your conclusions and make your own perceptions. But then you forget to ask the artist, what does it mean? Because the artist will tell you specifically what it means. And sometimes they find out that they're way off base with what they're thinking. But I've always said that whenever you see Liberty and she's pregnant in my paintings, that means you can automatically perceive that means she's giving birth to a new idea, giving life to something new.
Rena thinks this is awesome. No. And by the way, a few comments ago, she said, contact me.
Okay,
this one. I like this one. This one has a needle on it. If you're triggered by needles, look away or something. But
yeah, I am. Needles terrify me.
But I really love this.
Liberty 2021, The Cure. And I did that because we had gone through that whole COVID stage in 2020. And with 2021, we had this cure that's been developed. And so we're opening up the door to get back to doing what we want to do, what we're used to doing. But we also have to have that cure in us, that injection, whether it's Pfizer or Moderna or whatever.
Which one are you?
I'm Pfizer. I'm taking
Moderna.
the Pfizer.
I'm Moderna.
And our doctors are doing a lot. I have a biologist son who's studying biology. I have a biologist friend who lives up north. But I trust scientists. I really do, because I don't know everything. And I have to trust the science and the scientists, because just like I paint and I know painting, they do science, and that's their art, and they know that art. That's what they do. And when people say that, well, it's got a microchip in it, or it's magnetic, or it turns you into a zombie, see, these are crazy people talking. And I don't know, you can't change crazy, but I will tell you this one thing I learned from the old guys, and everything I talk to you about, I always learned from older people when I was younger. But I had one of my, it was a warden that told me, he always said, Smitty, never try to make sense out of nonsense. Don't even waste your time. And that's why when people start talking that nonsense about microchips, magnetic fields, and zombieism, it's just nonsense, and I don't have time to engage.
I think those are pretty easy to plop over here and say,
Exactly.
forget those guys. But what about,
engage.
When you have people of color, Black people in particular, that look back on Tecumseh and look back on not trusting the medical system? Is there valid arguments there? Is it the same thing? Are we comparing apples and oranges?
It's not the same thing, and that's what they have to understand. And it's really important to do your own research, because doing your own research, especially if you go into it with an open mind. I have to go into everything with an open mind, because like I said, I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. So I have to go into it with an open mind, and I look to the people who do know these things, and I trust their opinions because they do. I'm alive today because my cardiologist, I trusted his opinion. There were surgeries he could have did on me, but he told me those surgeries, if we go in and something goes wrong, you're done. And he said, well, I think you should deal with the medications more than the surgery. Take these pills and opt out of the surgery, which I did. I took the pills. This was 10 years ago. And what they found out through research, and I'm sure I'm part of one of those samples that they researched, the people who went on pills for their heart disease have outlived the people who opted for the surgeries. They found that CDC study in 10 years. And so what I always tell people is do your research and talk to people who know what they're doing. I have allergies. So when they talked about allergic reactions with a few people, with the, I think it was Moderna vaccine that people were having allergic reactions to, I talked to my pharmacist about it. I says, well, I haven't taken the shot yet because this was back in March because of the allergies, and I'm not sure, would I have an allergic reaction, because that could be dangerous for me. And he has my medical record there, and he says, well, what are your allergies again? And I told him shellfish iodine. He said, no, none of those ingredients are involved in the making of this medicine, so you should be fine. And he was right. I took the shot. I had a sore arm for that night, and the next day I was okay. So
man, I was going to offer you a lobster dinner after this show.
No, I can't. You don't want to give me shellfish, not unless you like to see people trajectory vomiting.
I don't like that at all. But I would hate.
We could probably get a lot of views on TikTok.
We'll be TikToking the allergic reaction to shellfish.
Exactly.
Oh, babe. Let's switch subjects.
The Black American
We're
boycott.
going to go for 3 hours. That we're already an hour.
That's fine. I'm good. Right. The Black American boycott for equality, and that started. Oh my! It really kicked in back when Michael Brown was killed in Missouri, And that really bothered me because it's shameful that our government, and this is what our government did, they shut down all communications. That's a military move. Yep. They shut down all communications so we couldn't see, we couldn't come into contact. We didn't even really know what was going on in that city. How desperate of an act is that? That really, even now, it makes me mad to even talk about it. But they shut us off from the reality that we need to face, that something needs to change. And you can't change things by saying, okay, let's just close the door on that so the rest of the world can't see it. Michael Brown's death was real. And so that's when I started the Black American Boycott for Equality. And it was based on the readings of Martin Luther King, who Martin Luther King basically felt that picketing and protesting is necessary and it can be effective, but boycotting is even greater because, boy, I tell you, you want to bring about change, cut the money off. You know, cut the money off. I guarantee you'll get change real fast because this country loves its money. And when Martin Luther King and those people down there in Alabama stopped riding that bus, the transit authority lost tons of money. And that's when you saw things change there. They lost a lot of money because Black people were not walking to wherever they had to get to. Ride shares, which we have that now, they were doing that. And it was in order to make changes in the way they were being treated. And so that's where Babe came in at, was I really believe we need to boycott. We need to boycott these big businesses. I will not wear a pair of Nike shoes, even if it meant saving my own life. Nike will never get my money. Nike does not care about the Black man. He cares about the Black money, okay? And if my Black life doesn't matter to them.
Which is a $1.3 trillion market.
Exactly. And if my Black money doesn't matter if my Black life doesn't matter to Nike, then my Black money will have no influence in their business. And when you talked about that, what was it, 1.3 trillion? The average Black Americans as a whole, we spend at least $1.9 trillion annually in this country. 1.9 trillion is a lot of money. Can you imagine that if even half of that we said, okay, well, we're not going to buy, we're not going to spend, we're going to set it aside.
Well, we're not going to give it to Bezos. We're going to put
That's
it in our
right.
own community.
Put it in our own community, which is what I talked about back in early July out here when I was talking about Babe. We have a tendency to take our money and dump it right into the top to that wealthiest 1%. Our money goes right there. And by the time it trickles back down into our community, it's nothing left but crumbs. And we don't want crumbs. We can't live off crumbs. We need bread. And the way you develop that bread is to push your money up through these local venues, local services, and the ones who agree with your theory that, you know, all life should matter. Because for right now, Black life hasn't mattered. Lives of people of color have not mattered. But in order to bring that to an end so that they do matter, we need to push that money right up through the bottom of our communities. We need to reestablish and rebuild these communities, and that falls on all of our shoulders. We're all responsible for that.
Have you ever watched Killer Mike's Trigger Warning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see where he was talking about how the white and Asians will keep their dollar in their community
yes,
for like
they
30
do.
days.
Yeah.
Latinos maybe 12 days.
Yeah.
And then the Black community 6 hours.
Yeah.
And that made my heart, I don't even know what, twinge or something, because it was like 6 hours before you get handed a dollar, before you have to hand it to someone.
Yeah.
Fuck
man.
that, man.
I'm so tired. I squeak right now. I told people I don't wear Nikes. I don't. And even with Converse, which is my favorite shoe, they're owned by Nike now. So I don't even do that. I just get an off-brand, made in America. I don't have any gym shoes under that. But if you're at my place, you see that you won't find anything Nike there. Nothing with a marker or moniker on it. that supports these people up here that's sitting at 1% that are gaining in wealth while the people down here are suffering.
So boycott Nike. Who else, man? Give us 2 or 3 more.
Nike's one to boycott. Amazon's another one.
We already have that on the list. That's for damn sure.
And Chick-fil-A, that guy, he just need to get a life. I cannot stand him. And besides that, I make better chicken than they do. So if you want a real chicken meal, I'll make you a meal. All you got to do is provide the chicken and whatever, and I'll hook you up.
For being so, never mind.
I can't deal with them. I am not. The LGBTQ community is just as important to me as the Black community because they have found themselves in the same similar struggle as Black people had for years now. And that is, why should we have to go through the courts to be accepted as human beings? We had to go through the courts to be free. Does that make sense to you? That we have to appeal to a judge and say, we don't want to be slaves anymore. These things.
We had to fight wars. We had to change
laws. Exactly.
We had to make amendments.
Exactly.
We had to we had to fight for civil rights.
Exactly.
And then we're still questioned
in the court of law. And those things just don't make sense to me because we're all human beings and we should be eligible to the same freedoms, rights, and privileges as another human being, no matter what color his skin is. But that's not the case here in America. Our lives and our lifestyle has been dictated once again by justice. And justice is what created the whole problem in the first place.
Would you say earlier, just this or just us or just, what'd you say?
Justice?
Earlier you said you had a play on words there.
I don't know.
It's all right,
I go on through a lot of things.
And you and I are super old.
I go through so many things so fast. It's so much fun.
Moldy crumbs inside a corral with 100 starving people to fight over.
Mm-hmm.
We've been taught materialism as well. We can have more money if we did not follow the idea that we need to live like the celebrities.
Exactly.
And I think Rena's spot on. I think it's very topical right now.
I like that. I like that because I've been thinking about that the past couple of days. I said, I live like a rock star but without the money. I keep long, odd hours because sometimes I have so much going on. Painting, I write a lot, poetry. That my mind just never wants to shut down. But I said I don't have all that kind of money like they do. But I certainly do live the productive kind of lifestyle where I'm constantly dealing with my art, dealing with my writing, and dealing with, most of all, developing myself and improving myself. Self-improvement is really big for me. I really believe that the biggest assessment I can make is the assessments that I make of myself first.
You're so awesome. Just double checking something. So what's your mission, man? You're all over the place kind of, but I don't think you are. I think you can articulate this enough.
I'm really not all over the place. My whole mission is to make sure that our children have a future. That's the thing I look at. I've lived, and I always tell people that 62, I'll be 63 in a few months.
You got?
7. And all with the same mom, because I always get that from people. No, they've got the same mom and dad. Just like my parents, I have 10 other siblings.
11, right?
11 total. I'm number 9. And then my mom's family, there was 13, 14 kids. My dad's side, 6 kids. So we all had big families. But I've carried over what their concept of the future was too, and their life was, and that was to prepare these children for the future that is now theirs. I've had my experiences. I'm supposed to be retired, which is there really such a word as being retired? I don't think so. But But I look at these kids, not just my own, like I said earlier, and I see my future. See, that that's what I want to see. I want to see my future. I want to be a part of that, their development. And I want to open the door and tell, okay, this is the door. There's the world. It's your turn now. Go out there and make a difference. It's your time. So, yeah, that's where I am.
I know I shouldn't have had a show with you because I already like you too much, man. Now I'm going to be stalking you all the time. You see, now I'm like that. What do you do every damn day to push that forward?
What I do every damn day to push that forward, I used to, this is something, and I've never really talked to anybody about this, so this will be a first, and it's going public. I always engage with people, and a lot of times people always said, well, I feel comfortable talking with you about my problems because you always come away with an answer or a way to deal with it. And I'd sit there and watch their life just blossom. They'd be like, I'm so blessed now, and I'd be like, why can't I touch myself and be blessed too? and it did that for a while. It would bother me. It's like, all these people I come into contact with, they leave with a smile, and then the next day they come back and tell me how after they talk with me or dealt with me, they feel so blessed. Why can't I be the blessing? And I thought to myself, maybe that was the wrong way for me to look at it. Maybe I was meant to be the blessing and not so much as to be blessed. And that being the blessing is my blessing. So that's every damn day I get up and I say, begin with me, just like the t-shirt I used to wear. Change begins with me. I look in the mirror. I make evaluations of myself first and foremost. I'm more critical of me than I could be of any other person. So I really hold myself accountable for a lot of things, and I have expectations of myself in certain areas. And so I always wore that begin with me t-shirt, but begin with me and go out and be the blessing, instead of being so focused on how can I be blessed today, go out and be the blessing, because people need blessings more. There's more people that need blessings than me just worrying about being blessed myself.
I hardly know how to respond to that, except for the fact that every single time you've walked up here and I've been busy or distracted or think I'm doing something important, and I turn around and see your smile and feel your energy, I'm like, oh shit, Edward's here. Nothing else matters right now. And I'm telling you, that's the truth.
I know.
Okay.
And you're busy, because how you do this is amazing. I really, like I said, I appreciate this place because there's so much going on and it's so important. It's sort of like a lighthouse in the dark, okay, so to speak. That lighthouse in the dark that shines a light so the ships can see their way to shore without crashing into any rocks or things that are out in the water that they can't see. And this is sort of like that beacon in the lighthouse right here in this city of Lansing. So I enjoy coming here.
I didn't mean to shift anything towards me, but I will say that it's people like you that show up, that give me that strength and let me borrow a little bit of energy from time to time and just fill me full of hope. We daisy chain these shows together. Yesterday on the show, I had Daphne Whitfield. She's got the I'm drawing a blank on her company name. We'll get over that for a second. It's the Dunfield Road. And a combination of her mom's name and her dad's name. What inspires you?
Well, people inspired me. I was telling a friend, this was maybe last year, and he was talking to me about my artwork, because a lot of people that I know or have met, when I first meet them, they don't know that I create art. And then I was showing them some of the paintings. And he says, well, how do you come up with these ideas? And I said, I come up with them by interacting with people like I am with you right now. And I say, people don't understand that a lot of times. He sort of looked at me when I said this. I says, I plagiarize people's thoughts, which means in a good way. People share their thoughts with me, and those thoughts become images. and those images become paintings. A lot of the paintings that I do are probably pieces of other people that I've talked to. You know, their thoughts, their opinions, their what excites them, what makes them sad, what makes them happy. And then I have these images that I create from that conversation, and it goes into a painting. So yeah, I think it's human interaction is what inspires me every day. Just human interaction.
You're the epitome of community.
The Johnny Five image, you know, that is like, if you wanted to define me, Johnny Five, he said, I need input. He was always like, need input. And that's what I do when I go out and I talk with people. It's for input.
See, I feel like that too. I'm nothing but audio.
Exactly.
Point.
Exactly.
But with you, I'm aligned. And with Rena, we're a plane. And with someone else, we're
exactly
a whole sphere.
Yeah. And so that's it. You know, just you know, people are there and they have a lot to share. And listening is important for me. I'm a much better listener than I am a talker, and that's come over with years of practice. Of you know, when I was younger, I was more into me and what I wanted to do and everything. But then I discovered I learn more and I develop and grow more if I listen more, because there's so many more people out there. All of them are different in a way. Similarities, yes, we do have, but all of them have little different nuances that make up them, that make them who they are.
I never learned anything when my mouth was open.
Yeah. I learned more listening than anything, and then I learned to be a better responder, because as one guy put it, he said, people want to say they want to get to know me, and really they're getting to know themselves. It's like they already had, for every response that you could give them, they already have a preset answer to it. Instead of hearing what you're saying, they're already onto what they want to, how they want to respond. And that's not a good listener at all. So,
no, yeah. It's not even a good person to
Exactly.
So tomorrow on the show, I've got David Hess. He does a podcast called Rising Above.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to ask him?
Well, with David Hess, I would ask him something that was put to me years ago by a psychologist friend of mine. He worked in corrections too. And I would go see him to talk through things. His name was Dr. John Hand. And John would always ask me, this was back in my 30s, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I could never answer that. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 5 years. But then when I had the heart disease, it all changed, and I could see myself planning my life in 5-year increments, what things I wanted to accomplish in 5 years. So that's what I would ask Mr. Hess is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
I love that question.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
Well, actually, I should be on the road traveling. I should be in California right now.
Well, you're 2 years into your 5-year thing, right?
No. This was I'm 11 years now into my 5-year increment.
I started your second year of your third 5-year.
Yep, my third 5-year increment. But things sort of went haywire, because when I started the whole increment thing, it was I said I want to do 5-year increments, and this was based on medical studies with the heart disease, because they said your chances of survival at this point are 10 years, no more. I said, well, I need 11. So I split things up into 5-year increments, because I wanted to see my kids graduate, because I graduated and neither one of my parents were alive to see it. And they were really big on that, because they didn't complete high school when they were living in the South. They ended up marrying young and having kids.
Where'd they grow up?
They grew up my father was in Shannon, Mississippi. My mother lived in Tupelo, Elvis country.
My wife's from Fulton.
Really? Yeah.
10 miles east of Tupelo.
Yep, that's right. My father used to walk 8 miles to date my mother. I got that from her, back when I would talk to her about him. But because they didn't live to see me graduate, I wanted to see my kids graduate. And that's how I ended up with the 5-year increments, because all the medical research said You know, your first year will be hardest. Most people die within the first year of heart disease. And then the 5th year is going to be hard, and then that's when the second wave died. And then the 10th year, you won't make it. You know, by 10, you're done. And I said, well, I need 11. I'm at 12 now, going on 13. And I said, well, I need 11. And I had this plan. Even my son at 8, he was 8 at the time. And I had this 10 years to do. And I said, you know, I want to see you graduate. And he even wrote he drew a picture and a card of a stick figure, which was me and him. I love you, and I'll see you when I graduate, you know. And I saved that, you know, that was my motivation. And we never expected, he graduated in 2020. We never saw the pandemic coming. So, you know, he didn't get to do the cap and gown thing.
So you didn't really get to see
exactly.
But you saw
I was still there, to be with him. And we spent a lot of time together. We talked about that, laughed about it. There were things that they did in public, like they had a parade, drive-by parade for all the graduates and everything. And, no, unfortunately, no. He is a Shamrock. He went to St. Pat's.
Oh, okay.
My kids are in the Portland School District, so. And this was another cool thing about it. We allowed some of them we homeschooled for like the first 6-7 years. And then when they were old enough to make choices, sound choices, we let them make choices. You can continue homeschooling, or you can go to public school or private. And some of them went to St. Pat's private, and some of them went to Portland High. So yeah, so I didn't get a Quaker out of the deal, but
that's all right.
But they all played football, so I was happy with that. The boys did. So, but yeah, that's what I would ask Mr. Heiss is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Look at the 5-year plan, and like I said, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, I was supposed to, after Net graduated, my plan was to get rid of all my stuff, buy an RV, and just travel around the country. And so, yeah, I should be in California right now, but there's so many restrictions when you go from state to state and city to city. And so it'd be hard pressed to travel now, because what state says, okay, we're open and you can go about, and what states say, well, we want you to stay in for 2 weeks or whatever. So with the pandemic, sort of put a crimp on things, but I'm still hopeful.
And there's still sundown state.
Cities,
right? Yeah.
So I'm still hopeful, but you know, I'm happy where I'm at and with the way things are going.
I hope you get to do that.
I hope so too.
Traveling, I miss you.
Yeah, I would have to come back every now and then. I know that, but I always tell my kids, you know, and this is important because I did it when I was young, but it was one of the, in spite of having the loss of my parents, it also opened doors up to me to be more liberated and travel more. And I traveled a lot when I was younger. Florida, Canada, Tennessee, you know, I was just all over the map as much as I could be. And I always tell my kids, you know, try to travel while you're young and you have all that energy. And then get to see some different places and different people and have some different and unique experiences. I think that's really important with our youth. Instead of being staked down like the elephant to the tree and only knowing everything within 5 feet of you is not good. Venture out beyond that, see some other things, have some bigger experiences for yourself. And so, yeah, I'd ask him, where does he see himself in 5 years?
I'll ask him that. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I've started TikToking the guest question every day. Mm-hmm. So I'll talk about where I see myself in 5 years after the show and out on TikTok.
Yeah.
So follow the Fledge on TikTok. Because, by the way, this is the first time I'm going to say this out loud. Mm-hmm. If I get to 10,000 followers and I can go live, I'll keep doing every damn day.
Wow. Okay.
Otherwise,
that sounds good.
On September 11th.
Whoa.
So,
no.
9/11.
We can't. Yeah, no. We can't let that happen.
Happiness, sadness, joy, hope, or love. Which word or words would you like to talk about?
Let's talk about sadness and love. And I'm gonna focus on both of them because there are times where I've been sad. There's times when I thought that over these last 10 years, there's been days, I call them bad air days, where the breathing is difficult. And I think that, you know, this is just not going to work. I can't continue doing this. The heart's going to give out on me in a while. And that has a tendency to make me sad. But I've learned to embrace that sadness. And I wanted to talk about the sadness aspect of it, because you have so many people right now in the pandemic that it's been difficult on them, difficult emotionally, difficult on them socially. I remember talking with one of my sons, he's in Texas now, and he said, I've had thoughts of suicide. I told him, I said, we all have those thoughts. I can't think of many people in the world who haven't had that thought at one point in time in their life, sometimes several, which is me, And I said, there's a conversation I had with a friend of mine, John Kason, and we were talking about this. It was back before my kids were even born. We were talking about suicide in the prison system. And John would look at me, and I never forgot this. He said, Smitty, nobody loves me more than me. And I just laughed because I understood exactly what he was saying. Immediately, I understood it. He's a married man. He has a wife who loves him. He has kids who love him. He has family, relatives, and friends who all love him. But in his darkest moments, when that thought comes in his head that says, well, just kill yourself and be done with it, it's crazy. He loved himself more, enough to not do that. And that's why I want to get back to that, why I combine the sadness and love thing together. Because when you feel like that, you really have to love yourself more. There's people out there, and I've seen it and read about it. I remember one friend of mine in Los Angeles, a guy jumped off a building, a neighboring building of hers, and he committed suicide. And I said, he didn't love himself enough. Because there are people out there who do. They sincerely love you and care about you, but they don't know what's going on in your mind at that one instant when you're alone. And it's that one instant when you're alone where it's up to you to love yourself more. You got to double down on the love. If you have to, triple down on it. Because what happens with the person that commits suicide, they're gone. They decided to commit suicide. But you've also devastated the people who you left behind, the people who loved you, the people who care about you, the people who were there for you. They just weren't there at that split second for whatever reason. It could be late at night and everybody's sleeping or whatever. And then after you love yourself more, reach out to people. Get up, get out, and reach out and reestablish those love alliances that you have with people. You have to save yourself sometimes. And
Put the mask on first when it drops down in the plane, right? Yeah.
And it just hurts me whenever I hear or read about somebody that commits suicide, because I said it only took a split second. And then going back to the impulse control thing, which is a split second impulsive thing, they needed to, for that 1 second, to love themselves more.
I usually point out the epiphanies I have during my show, but they've been rattling too quick. I'd waste the whole show. 2 days ago, Jazz and Paul, that have a Stay Rooted, they ship plants.
I saw that show.
They talked about know thyself and love thyself, and the Fledge community, our people around here, we've had 2 suicides in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I read about that too.
And you're exactly, because both of those people, you can't look at them and say, that's who's going to commit suicide next, because they were the ones absorbing the blows and taking on all this stuff, and they didn't love themselves for that split second.
For that split second, and it's all it is. You just got to say, no, this is not for me. Suicide is not what my life was meant to be defined by in its finality. This is not for me. I need to love myself right this moment, because the people who love me cannot be right here for me at this time, but they expect me to love myself more right now. Like I said, even if you got to double down or triple down on the love, go ahead and do it, because you're worth it.
I bet to some people that sounds really like egotistical. I love myself, and you ain't talking about that.
No. It's compassionate. It's compassionate love. if you ever want to read a book about sorrow, there's a book that I read, and this was back when I had heart disease, to another one of my therapists that I still keep in touch with. The book was called Final Gifts, and it's an easy read. It's not a very thick book, maybe less than 100 pages or so, but it was written by hospice nurses about people in their final days, and that book was so beautiful. And some parts had humor.
Tell me the name again.
Final Gifts. And I got it at the public library, but you can also buy it online too. Final Gifts. It was written years ago by hospice nurses, and it's about people that they were caring for in their last days of life. And I've never read a more beautiful book that taught me the value of life, the value of love, the value of what you leave behind, for your family and your friends and the people that love you, and those memories that they want to have or will have of you are good memories. It'll be of the good times, not the bad. It'll be all about the good. And so that was one of the books that helped me through, dealing with the heart disease and having these 5-year increments over 10 years to be here now.
So thank you so much.
Oh, I love you, brother.
Walking in this porch, up the porch today, and coming in here.
It's funny.
Filling the slot.
It's funny because some told me, I said, well, he might just do this whole thing today. I knew that coming over here.
You did tell me that.
And I'm glad you did, because I was sitting at home. I watched the family that does the plants.
Oh yeah.
And then the who was the doctor you had on here, the MD.
Yeah,
I was taking
Lisa.
notes, yeah.
Dr. Lisa
And so I could relate to a lot of things that they were talking about. So yeah, I came in here thinking, well, today might be my day to do this interview. So just be prepared. And I was. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you for that. And this is the second longest show we've ever had, which I'm really happy about, because there's nobody more that I would love to talk to than you.
I enjoy your company. I really do.
Who would you like to take us out with?
Take you out with?
I enjoy your company too, by the way.
What I like to take you out with is, when tomorrow comes, if we're all here, that point I was making about going out and being the blessing, is really important. There's so many people out there, and there's so much suffering, so much hardship, so much heartache, so much despair. Go out and try to be that blessing tomorrow. When I wake up in the morning, that's it for me. Is this, Ed, be the blessing in that beacon, like I was saying, in the dark, that people say, okay, there's a light, there's something I can look to find direction, so that I don't become shipwrecked. And I guess that would be it for me.
I want to ask you a question now.
Go ahead.
Do you think people think that's difficult and that there's no reward?
I do.
People that have never done that before.
It is. It's hard to, but I have grown a lot. Most people will tell you when I was in high school, they say it even today, you were always so quiet. And they say that about another classmate of mine who's a doctor now. And she was really quiet too, but they say you two are the most talkative people we've met now. But we've grown. See, and it takes a while to come out of that shell, but time provides you with the opportunity to grow and to blossom. And so for people who are apprehensive and say that, well, I don't know, I feel apprehensive about reaching out, and there's this little twinge of anxiety that comes with it too, I'm sure. You just have to keep practicing it. I worked at it. It's not something that just happened overnight. It happened over time. It took patience. It took work. It took me trusting myself and trusting other people, to come to this point. So just keep working at it is what I would say to them.
And I would also say, if you don't mind me adding to it,
no, go for it.
That being the blessing, it doesn't take a piece of you and give it to somebody else. It makes a piece of you bigger. And being the blessing is not I don't know. It's abundance.
Yeah.
It multiplies. It's catchy.
It does.
It's contagious. Is
Mhm.
what I mean by that.
Yeah.
And I love the advice.
It's like the paying it forward whole concept. You know, you become the blessing of somebody, and that person goes out and blesses 5, 6 more people, and it just blossoms like that. Even if it's just a simple smile and a greeting, you know, you can make somebody's day and not even have known that you did. So
and change their whole trajectory. Because
exactly.
maybe they weren't in love with themselves at that very second.
Yeah, yeah. So